the biggest topic of conversation in college sports lately is NIL transfer portal. NIL transfer portal. It's all you hear about. It's all people talking about. It's coaches talking about it. It's fans talking about it. And for every complaint, I have had a counter. For example, when people say it's ruining the sport, I say, what about the actual football on the field was different? Well, nothing when you think about it. Ole Miss fans, you remember when Kentucky came to Oxford. Beautiful day, packed stadium, visuals were awesome. Jared Ivey strips Will Levis, you win the game. That was incredible. Did it matter to you that some of those guys on the field were getting paid to be there? Probably not, right? Same thing in Starkville. When you blocked it was a field goal, right? We blocked a field goal in the Texas A&M game.
Yeah.
I saw a video from the field level of the crowd when that kick was blocked.
Going crazy.
It was nuts. And if you were there, you remember that. And were you thinking in your mind, oh, this is a shame. I don't enjoy this because players are getting paid. No, of course not. The football didn't change. Oh, well, it's going to change recruiting because the best schools are going to get the best players. As we've learned, the talent is more spread out so far than ever. There's been a counter to all of this that I have had. Transfer portal. Yes, you lose players, but also you add players. Mississippi State got better in the transfer portal. Ole Miss got better in the transfer portal. It's a useful tool if you use it correctly. Southern Miss, my gosh, you've got an entire sides of the ball's worth of players that were at SEC schools, players you couldn't sign otherwise. There is one thing, though. There is one thing.
What's that one thing,
that fans talk about that I agree with completely. And it's when they say, I don't feel as connected to my team anymore. I hear that often, and you know what? You're right. And I think the issue, though, lies with the schools and not with the NCAA or whatever. It is harder to – I've had friends that talked to a couple of guys recently. When they go to the first game, they're like, I need to bring a roster because I have no idea who's on the team anymore. Because players out, players in, and it's not on one day. It's players out some time after the season ends, and they may or may not return. Who knows? We'll see. And, they're supposed to be in the portal by this date, but that date is a little ambiguous, and then they have to sign by a certain date, but some schools you have to sign on this day, and some schools you have to be enrolled on this day, and then there's another window in May, and then there's an early signing period and a February signing period, and it's all just all over the place. So it's hard to keep track of who these people are, and it's hard to get attached to who these guys are because Davison Igbinosun, for example, left after a year. Or Troy Brown, I'm using Ole Miss players as an example, came in who only had a year.
Right.
So I hear you, and I think you're spot on. It is getting harder. The fan days are gone. The meet the Bull. Did State do a meet the Bulldogs before last season?
Yeah, they're doing one for baseball this weekend. I don't know about football though. I don't remember if they did one or not.
Why did those go away? COVID is the easy excuse, but guess what? You can do that again. We're okay. That we are finally the president's gonna just the COVID emergency's ending in May, I guess, is the date that it's going to be gone. But you can do those again. But why don't you? If you're going to have this player movement, why are you making it so hard for people to know who these guys are? You have $100+ million athletic budgets. You have in-house media people. Make these players and your players more visible, more forward-facing. Give fans a reason to connect with these guys.
Even talking about the media, like they do have those in-house guys, but like it used to be, for the media, we would request players and get interviews with them, and we could tell their stories and things like that. Those days are over. Basically, last year with State, you got Austin Williams and Buki Watson. That was who came to do interviews. Not even Will Rogers did a ton of interviews for State last year. Maybe after the game, but not a ton. For me, and this is something I've always said, with college sports especially, I've never tried to be too attached to the players. I stay attached to the jersey and the helmet. And I've always said that if we woke up tomorrow and swapped rosters, I would tell you that Jackson Dart and Quinshon Judkins are the two best players in the SEC. Yeah. That Will Rogers is a system quarterback, and he's totally overrated, and he won't throw for any yards at Ole Miss. And that's just how it goes. And it is tougher this year. I mean, you know, especially with you think about a player like Ra Thomas. You see him your first 2 years, like, man, this guy's going to be a superstar for us. Now he's gone. And, you know, you have the issues with Xavier Thomas and Tulu Griffin. You know, getting them back into the portal is just like, why do we have to go through this drama? But again, and this is what we talked about last year from the national championship game through Labor Day weekend, right? It was always NIL, playoff expansion, conference realignments, all these topics, the topics that I like to roll my eyes at and let you and Richard talk. And I just sit here and go, I don't care. I just want to watch the games. Once we get to the games, nobody, like you said, nobody cares. Nobody. It's like, I just can't stand the way college football is going, and it's just blah, blah, blah. Hey, kickoff is in 1 hour. Let's go!
Yeah.
And that's all it is. Yeah. And that's how it's always going to be. We will spend the next 7 months, 8 months, griping and complaining and this, that, and other. And then when toe meets leather on Labor Day weekend, it's all is forgiven for 4 months.
Those things do need to come back, though. The meet the Bulldogs, meet the Rebels day, that kind of stuff. And I was talking to somebody about this, and he said, well, Ole Miss does the season. State has one of those too. But, I mean, the season features a very small handful of players, and before he transferred, it was the John Rice Plumlee
NIL is
hour.
a reason that this has gone away, too. Don't forget. NIL is a reason this has gone away. Players don't want, that used to be where you bring in your stuff and the kids would sign it, and nobody wants to do that for free anymore.
That's a shame. They should. I mean, NFL players do it.
They should just say, look, if you can't bring your own stuff, we will provide a schedule that the players can sign. We will provide a poster schedule the players can sign for you.
Something like that.
But if you bring a helmet or a jersey, they will not sign it.
And that's fair to me because you have autograph seekers
unless you want to pay them, and maybe you can set up a thing where like the Bulldog Initiative has a booth. Just go over there, like, here's $20. Can Will Rogers sign this for me?
Something, because like, to use an NBA example, I mean, the New Orleans Pelicans payroll is hundreds of millions of dollars, right? You got Brandon Ingram, who's making $30 million a year, goes to a fan day that they had during their season last week, where if you were a season ticket holder, you got to hang out. They got a full tour of the facility. They had a stage set up with a band playing, and all the players were there. And so you got to hang out and meet the players. These are NBA players worth tens of millions of dollars a year. Ingram's contract is like $160 million is what his contract is worth. Yeah. Zion Williamson is there, right? Like mega stars making mega money in the middle of the season. If you have a season ticket package, any of them, you got to go meet and hang out with these guys. Like
that's probably the next step for schools, don't you think?
They have to do stuff like that. Have to
season tickets, because otherwise, how are you getting people there? I mean, could you imagine, like, you set up, hey, the week before, during the bye week, maybe we're going to have a get together in the Gridiron Club, or whatever it is at Ole Miss. I don't know what it's called. At State, it's the Gridiron Club, where you can come in and there'll be some players there, and we're going to provide food, and you can take pictures. You can go out on the field and take pictures, and whatever. And we'll have a drawing that night to see who wins this. That. I mean, you got to do something.
Yes, because it's when it's just the helmet and the jersey, fans will still support it because it's your helmet and your jersey that you love. But Quinshon Judkins is a skateboarder. Did anybody know that? Anybody know that?
I did not know that. I did not know that. It
Not
makes a lot of sense as
you would
agile
want
as he is.
So many people to know. All of these players have a little quirk like that, and because of all the movement, fans are disconnected. The schools need to get fans back in that way. Let them connect again. They'll buy tickets. They'll go to games. They'll donate to collectives if they care about the people, not just the helmet. Mike in Madison says this Saturday during the Mississippi State Baseball Fan Day, if the fan joins the Dugout Club for a very reasonable amount, there's dinner with coaches and the players and a tour of the facility. Great way for fans to interact and contribute, which helps with small projects. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about that needs to be more. And it's not even just like fan days and stuff. We don't need to get bogged down with fan days. It's hard enough. We get another message. Along with the idea you're talking about, couldn't buy a program at Ole Miss games last season. As a result, it nearly took the whole season before we could recognize who was playing in the game and who made the plays.
Yeah, everybody's doing digital programs these days.
Yeah.
And like a lot of fans, that's just not something they're going to want to do.
You know how much easier it is?
I don't want the program on my phone. I want to hold a program.
Yes. And it's little things like, especially, you got to lean into it. But what's wrong with, I mean, maybe it's a QR code scan. I don't know. Just having a roster to give to people. You don't have to sell $10 programs. Just here's one sheet. You want a roster so you can know who these guys are on the field? Little things like that make it so much easier. But instead, everything's all digital. I mean, I loved growing up keeping tickets. My dad and I would go to one big college football game a year. We'd keep the ticket stubs, and he would frame the tickets with a picture of us in it. I've got a whole wall of them. Now those are gone. Little experiences that I had growing up. Programs as well. I've got programs framed. Got a bunch of them saved. Little things like that that are going away are going to start costing you the emotional time. I'd talk about going to Furman games growing up. It's a little bit of a different scale when it's FCS versus, the SEC. But after they beat Western Kentucky in a playoff game, yes, that Western Kentucky, before they jumped up to Division I, my dad got me a souvenir football. We went on the field. Players are sitting there signing autographs. I've got that ball hanging up in my office, and Billy Napier's on it, if you can believe it. And Bear Reinhardt from the band Need to Breathe played wide receiver there. His autograph is on that ball as well. But that's something that I'm 31, I'm about to be 31 next month. That still sticks with me. I look at that ball and I smile because I remember when I got to those guys signed my football. And I'm 12 years older than they were at the time. When you take those experiences away, it gives little Michael less of a reason to be in love with you, essentially. Those kind of things, the fan days, stuff like that, make rosters more accessible, more out in the open, but tell the stories of these players too. I mean, so give me an example of a state player from the transfer portal. Is there a 1-year rental on this team? Is there one?
Freddie Roberson would be one.
Who is he? Where'd he come from?
He's a wide receiver. I mean, I know a little bit about him. He's from Eastern Washington, but I'm not normal. It's my job to know these things.
So if you're a state fan out there, Eastern Washington, I'm sure he's got a pretty cool story or a journey of some kind. Who is this guy?
Played on the red turf. Yeah,
he played on the red turf. Why do fans not know all about this guy already? You got him for a year. He's a wide receiver that you hope's a plug-and-play guy. But he's going to class right now at Mississippi State. He's going to wear your uniform. And the fans that show up in week 1 aren't going to know anything about him. They're not going to know anything about him.
Very little, yeah.
That's a problem. If you can't connect with people, you don't care about what they do as much anyway.
And you're hitting on something that I've talked about a few times, like the way colleges kind of protect athletes from the media, like we're, the devil. Like in high school, and I don't cover high school football, but let's say I wanted to go cover a high school football game, right? And then after the game ended, I wanted to go, let's say Starkville's quarterback threw 4 interceptions and they lost. Trey Petty throws 4 interceptions and a loss. I can just go on the field and grab Trey Petty and be like, hey, what happened on those plays, right? And then in the pros, it's just part of the deal, right? You got to sit there at your locker and talk to the media. You got to show up for media for press conferences when they want you. That's just part of the deal. But in college, I mean, let me try to get Will Rogers.
Yeah,
let me try to say, hey, I want to sit down for 10 minutes with Will Rogers. I might as well ask to speak to Joe Biden. I mean, it's the same amount of national security around these people. And it's just like, that's with me, right? What am I going to be like? So, Will, you really sucked last year. Am I really going to sit there and do that? No, they know me.
Right.
They know who I am. And yet, I can't, they're never going to do that. So, that's how you have a guy like Marquise Spencer. Marquise Spencer played at Mississippi State for 4 years, started a number of games. The first interview he ever did in his life was at the NFL Combine. We never once talked to him at Mississippi State. That's not setting a guy up for success. Like,
Laramie
they need to
Tunsil's the
learn
same
those
way.
skills.
Because of the NCAA stuff, Hugh
Leo
Freeze
Lewis.
kept Tunsil so far away. And the thing is, everybody's first look at Tunsil was draft night, where
he didn't know what to do.
And the first thought was bad guy. Tunsil's bad guy.
Yeah.
Turns out he's a really funny and an interesting guy. But no Ole Miss fans got to see that because he was hidden. Hugh Freeze hid him from everybody.
I never spoke to Leo Lewis at Mississippi State. Never. They would not make him available. I thought maybe like at Pro Day we finally would get to talk to him. No. Yeah, and they made. I'll say this with Simmons. Simmons was available, especially when he was the senior or junior, and he was one of the captains. He came up to the podium every week and talked, and you couldn't ask for a better interview. He would answer any question you had for him. But that's the point. Let these guys learn how to interview. They need that life skill. Never mind the pros. Never mind going to the NFL. Just when you go to have a job, you need to be able to know how to answer tough questions.
Yeah.
What tough questions do I have? I'm not there to play gotcha.
Right. They're college football players. No, nobody's there to do that. Nobody's doing that. Hunter says, I honestly don't care what the player's favorite food is. Can he play? That's all I care about. And there are people like you. There are probably people listening to this that agree with you completely. And I'm not talking about give me your favorite food and your favorite color, but a lot of these guys have stories that you can connect to. Some of them have been hardships, some interesting. Guys that didn't play football in high school. Tavius Robinson for Ole Miss came from Canada. And yes, he was on the season once, but not everybody watches the season, for one. And two, he's got a deeper story than the little feature that you give on the season where you show them in their room or cooking dinner or whatever. There's a deeper story to the Canadian guy that moved to Mississippi to play football who's never lived in the United States before. And Hunter, I'm talking about this because I think it would be a smart business move. It's getting easier and easier for people to not go to games, right? We talk about that often. Expenses, all that. It's getting easier to not buy season tickets. It's probably easy for people to not donate to collectives, if we're being honest, because you don't know how much money is there. You don't get a spreadsheet with expenses and operating costs and where the money's going. It's all very vague. It's easy to not spend your money there. But if somebody has an emotional connection, they are more likely. My wife and I don't have a lot of money. On her birthday, though, I way overspend. Why? Because I have an emotional connection to her. I spend money that I shouldn't because I love my wife and I want her to have something nice. It's a similar concept here. You've got people that are not like you that don't really want to go, that don't really want to spend. But if their kid had that really cool moment at Fan Day with his favorite linebacker, little Johnny wants to go see that linebacker. He wants to go see him play because they're buddies. They shook hands. He signed my football. And that puts two butts in your seat. It's a business decision, if nothing else.
Just answer this. Does MSU have the same connection with Dak Prescott if he had played the last 2 years? And we didn't get to know him the way we did back in 2013, 14, 15?
Probably not.
Probably not.
He still would have been a great player, but you don't know anything about him.
Still would have been a great player, but you might not have ever known all the other stuff with Dak Prescott. You might not have ever known.
Anyway. Good stuff.